My family kicked me out on my birthday, and now they're trying to claim my new house as a family asset. Hey, I'm Robin, and wow, do I have a story for you. I'm 27, and lately, life's been chaotic. I work as a marketing assistant, not the most glamorous job, but it pays some of the bills. I live with my parents and younger brother, Tom, in a rundown, cramped house that's constantly falling apart and always smells strange, but it's home, or at least it was. Let me start by saying I've been doing a lot for this household. I cover a big share of the bills, buy groceries, and even handle repairs when things break. You'd think I'd get a little appreciation for all that, right? But no, whenever I walk into a room I hear my mum, Susan, talking down to me like I'm some kind of failure. Robin, when are you going to get a real job, she'd say, like it was her favorite thing to mention. I mean, what does she mean by a real job? I work hard, marketing isn't easy, but because I'm not a doctor or lawyer, it doesn't count in her eyes. And when I defend myself, she always says the same thing: if it were a real job, you'd have your own place by now, right, Mum? And then there's Tom, my 26-year-old brother. We've never really gotten along. He has this smug attitude, thinking he's better than me because he's got more social media followers or whatever. He barely does anything around the house. And guess who picks up the slack? Yep, me. But does anyone care? Nope. No. Anyway, my 28th birthday was coming up, and despite everything, I was sort of looking forward to it. I know, silly, right? But I had saved up and bought myself a fancy cake from this bakery downtown. I pictured a little celebration, just the four of us. It wasn't going to be a big deal, but I hoped they might actually care. So, a few days before, I sat down with my mum and dad, Mark, to talk about it. Hey, I was thinking we could do something for my birthday this weekend, just hang out, maybe have some cake, I said, trying not to get my hopes up. My mum didn't even look up from her magazine. We'll see, Robin. We might have plans? On my birthday, I should have known something was off, but I didn't want to believe it. I'd lived here my whole life, helping out and working hard. Why would they have plans without me? Fast forward to my birthday. I went to work, got a ton of happy birthday messages from my co-workers, and treated myself to a new outfit. Things were looking up. I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd come home to a small surprise, maybe a card, a cake, something. But the second I pulled into the driveway, my heart sank. All my stuff was on the front lawn boxes, bags, my clothes, my books, everything just tossed out like garbage. I rushed out of the car, my heart racing, and saw my mum, dad, and Tom just standing there, staring at me. It felt like some twisted family meeting. What's going on? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My mum stepped forward, her face cold and emotionless. Robin, it's time for you to move out. You're not welcome here anymore. I stood there, frozen, unable to process what she'd just said. Move out? On my birthday? What kind of sick joke was this? I looked to my dad, hoping he'd say something, anything, but he just stared at the ground, his hands in his pockets, refusing to meet my eyes. I felt a wave of anger and confusion. But it's my birthday. Where am I supposed to go? My voice cracked, and I hated how desperate I sounded. Then Tom chimed in, his smug grin making me want to scream. Maybe you should have thought about that before being such a burden all these years. A burden? I was the one paying the bills, buying food, and keeping this place from falling apart. How was I the burden? I turned to my mum, hoping for some kind of explanation. It wasn't enough, she said, her voice as sharp as a slap. We need the space, and you need to grow up. That was it. No sympathy, no second chances. Just cold indifference. Tears welled up, but I refused to let them see me break. Can I at least get my things? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. They're all packed, my mum said, motioning to the boxes on the lawn like it was no big deal. You should go now, and that was that. Happy birthday, right? I started loading the boxes into my car, my hands trembling. It felt surreal, like I was in someone else's nightmare. I wanted to scream, cry, demand to know how they could be so heartless, but I didn't. I just kept moving, loading box after box, trying to keep it together. As I packed the last of my things, I turned to them one last time, hoping, praying they'd change their minds. Why today? Why on my birthday? I asked, barely able to speak. My mum didn't even blink. Consider it our gift to you, independence, and with that, I drove away from the only home I'd ever known, with no idea where I was going. I ended up at a cheap motel, the kind with a flickering neon sign out front, spending my birthday alone, surrounded by hastily packed belongings. I stared at the ceiling, wondering how the people who were supposed to love me could be so cruel. How could they do this to their own daughter on her birthday? That night, I made a promise to myself I would never rely on them again. I would pick myself up no matter how hard it got, because clearly I was on my own now. After that nightmare of a birthday, I felt like I'd been run over. It wasn't just getting kicked out, it was realizing that the people I thought would always have my back simply didn't care. I spent that night in the dingy motel, trying to wrap my head around it, but nothing made sense. The next day, I did the only thing I could. I threw myself into work. What else was I supposed to do? I had bills to pay and needed to find a place to live. My boss, Hannah, noticed pretty quickly that something was off. I was staying late, hunched over my laptop, mindlessly answering emails. She's sharp, and it didn't take her long to pull me aside. It was late, and the office was nearly empty when she found me at my desk. "Robin, can we talk?" she asked, leaning against my cubicle. I glanced up, and I must have looked like a wreck, because Hannah gave me this concerned look. "You're going to burn yourself out at this rate. What's going on?" she asked. I hadn't planned on getting into it, but once she asked, everything just spilled out. I told her the whole story, how my family had kicked me out, how I was staying in this awful motel with all my stuff still in boxes. As I spoke, her expression softened. She didn't interrupt, just listened, which was already more than my family ever did. When I finally finished, she let out a deep breath and said, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I shrugged, feeling a bit awkward. After all, she's my boss, not my therapist, but she didn't seem to mind. "Look, Robin, I have a spare room at my place. It's not much, but you can stay there until you get back on your feet." I was stunned and didn't know how to react at first. "Are you serious?" I asked, half expecting her to take it back, but she smiled and nodded. "Oh, of course. I know what it's like to go through tough times. Don't worry about it." I was so relieved I nearly cried again, but I held it together. "Thank you," I whispered. "I don't know how to repay you." She waved it off, saying, "Don't even mention it. You've been doing great at work, and I don't want to see you burn out. Just promise me you'll take care of yourself." And just like that, I had a place to stay. It wasn't home, but it was something. The very next day, I packed up my things from the motel and moved into Hannah's guest room. The room was a bit small, but it was clean, warm, and quiet, all I really needed at the time. That first night I sat on the bed, just trying to process everything. I felt a little better, but there was still this empty feeling inside, like everything I thought I knew had been ripped away. Still, I didn't let myself dwell on it for too long. I threw myself into work even harder, if that was even possible. Hannah wasn't kidding when she said she'd push me more, but I honestly appreciated it. The work kept me distracted. I also started taking on more freelance jobs, figuring that the more I saved, the sooner I could get out on my own. It wasn't easy. Some nights I'd be up until 3 a.m., staring at my computer, trying to finish designs while my mind kept drifting back to my family. I kept thinking, maybe they'd call, maybe they'd apologize, maybe they'd realize they'd made a mistake. But no, nothing, just complete silence. During this time, my best friend Mike was a lifesaver. We'd been friends since college, and even though we didn't live in the same city anymore, we'd stayed close. I told him what happened, and he was furious. "I can't believe they'd do that to you," he said during one of our calls. "You deserve better." He wasn't wrong, but it still hurt. "Yeah, well, it is what it is," I muttered. "I just have to keep moving forward." Mike, always the joker, tried to lighten the mood. "You know what would really tick them off," he said with a laugh. "You becoming wildly successful and rubbing it in their faces." I laughed, but the idea stuck with me. Not that I wanted revenge, okay? Maybe a little, but mostly, I just wanted to prove to myself that I didn't need them. So, that became my mission: work harder, save more, and eventually move out of Hannah's guest room and into my own place. Over the next few months, things started to improve. My designs were getting noticed by bigger clients, and I was making more money than I ever had before. Every late night and sleepless all-nighter felt worth it, and slowly but surely I was rebuilding my life one project at a time. I started to feel like maybe I didn't need my family after all. Sure, it still hurt, and maybe it always would, but I was proving to myself that I could not only survive without them, I could thrive, and that felt amazing. One day, Hannah pulled me into her office, a huge smile on her face. "Robin, I have some good news," she said. "How does lead designer sound to you?" With a raise, of course. I was speechless. "Are you serious?" I blurted out, feeling like I might pass out from excitement. "Dead serious," she replied, still grinning. "You've earned it. You've been doing fantastic work, and it's time we acknowledge that I could hardly believe it. Lead designer? Me? It felt like all the hard work, sleepless nights, and stress were finally paying off. Thank you, I managed to say, still in shock. Don't thank me yet, she said with a wink. You'll have a lot more responsibility now. I didn't care, I was ready. This was what I'd been working toward. With the promotion and all the freelance gigs I'd been doing, I was finally in a position to start thinking about my next move literally. I wasn't going to stay in Hannah's guest room forever, and now I could seriously start looking for a place of my own. But it wasn't just about the money or the job, it was about finally feeling in control of my own life again. For so long, I'd felt trapped, stuck in that house with my family, stuck under their expectations, stuck under their judgment. But now, I was free. I was making my own decisions, building my own life, and no one could take that away from me. I was finally moving forward, and it felt incredible. A few weeks after I was promoted to lead designer, I was really starting to feel like I had my life back together. I'd been working non-stop, saving money, and was even considering getting my own place soon. Everything seemed to be going my way. But of course, just when things start going smoothly, life throws you a curveball. It was a random Wednesday afternoon. I was in the middle of a big project when my phone buzzed. I didn't think much of it, assuming it was just another email. But when I glanced at the screen, I saw the last name I expected, Tom, my brother, the last person I wanted to hear from. For a moment, I just stared at my phone, debating whether to answer. I hadn't heard from Tom or my parents since they kicked me out on my birthday, and honestly, I didn't miss them. But curiosity got the better of me, and I picked up. Hey, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. Robin, it's me, Tom replied, his voice quieter than usual. The lack of his usual arrogance threw me off. I know it's you, I answered, slightly annoyed. What do you want? There was a long silence, and for a second I thought he'd hung up. But then he spoke again, and I could hear the hesitation in his voice. I need help. I raised an eyebrow, not believing what I was hearing. Tom, the same brother who stood by while my things were thrown out, now needing my help. Yeah, right. I don't know what to tell you, I said, already feeling the anger rise within me. You made it pretty clear that I'm no longer part of the family, he sighed. Look, I know things have been tough, but this isn't about that. It's about Dad. He lost his job, and Mom's spending is out of control. I can't afford school anymore. There it was, the real reason for the call. It wasn't about me or an apology. It was about money. It was always about money. I bit my lip, trying to hold back the emotions rushing through me. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to remind him how they treated me, to hang up and never speak to him again. But another, smaller part still felt that old pull of family ties, even though they weren't what they used to be. So let me get this straight, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. You're calling me now, after months of silence, because you need money. It's not just about the money, Tom quickly responded. We're in a bad spot, Robin. You know how Mum, she's been spending like crazy, and Dad, well, he's not doing well without a job. I don't know what to do. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. That sounds like your problem, Tom, not mine. Come on, Robin, we're family, he pleaded, and I could hear the desperation creeping into his voice. It was the first time in years he had sounded vulnerable, but I wasn't buying it. Family, I scoffed, bitterness slipping into my words. You guys threw me out on my birthday. Family doesn't do that. He didn't have a response for that. The silence on the other end of the line told me everything I needed to know. I'm done being your backup plan, I said firmly. You, Mum, and Dad made it very clear where I stand with you all. Don't call me again. Before he could respond, I hung up. My hand trembled slightly as I set the phone down on my desk. A strange mix of anger, sadness, and relief washed over me. It felt good to finally stand up for myself and say no, but it was also sad that it had come to this. I sat there for a while, just staring at the wall, trying to process everything. I kept thinking about all the times I had sacrificed my own happiness for my family, all the times I bent over backward for them, and where had it gotten me? Homeless on my birthday. It was time to stop feeling guilty about walking away. They had made their choice, and now I was making mine. After that call, I buried myself in work. I didn't want to dwell on it for too long because I knew it would just drag me down. So I focused on the project in front of me, trying to push thoughts of Tom and my parents to the back of my mind. But once those thoughts creep in, it's hard to shake them. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the conversation over and over in my head. I kept thinking about what I could have said, what I should have said. I wanted to believe that, deep down, they were sorry, but I knew better. They weren't calling because they missed me or because they regretted what they'd done. They were calling because they needed something from me, and I wasn't going to let them use me again. The next morning, I woke up more determined than ever. It was time to focus on building my own life, my career, and my future. I couldn't keep looking back, wondering if things could have been different. They weren't, and that was the reality. From that day on, I promised myself I wouldn't let my family drag me down anymore. I'd been through enough, and I was finally in a place where I was starting to build something good for myself. I wasn't about to let them ruin that. Sure, a part of me still felt guilty for cutting them off, for not helping when they were obviously in a tough spot. But then I reminded myself, where were they when I needed help? Where were they when I was struggling? I didn't owe them anything, so I kept pushing forward. I worked hard, saved my money, and stayed focused on the future. Every time I felt that old guilt creep in, I remembered that phone call. They made their bed, and now they had to lie in it. I wasn't going to be their safety net anymore, and honestly, it felt good to finally be free. I eventually saved enough to buy a nice apartment, and it's probably the best thing that's happened to me in a long time. I was in the middle of a project, fully engrossed in my work, when the doorbell rang. At first, I thought it was just a package. I'd been ordering a lot of stuff for work lately, so I didn't think much of it. But when I checked the security camera, I froze. There, standing on my porch, were my parents and Tom. My stomach dropped, and it felt like I'd been punched. They hadn't reached out since that call with Tom weeks ago. I thought we were done. So why were they here? I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself before opening the door. My mind was racing with all the possible reasons they might be here. Maybe they'd come to apologize, or maybe they just wanted something else. Honestly, I didn't know which would be worse. When I opened the door, my mum, Susan, didn't even wait for me to say anything. She barged in like she owned the place, her eyes sweeping over the living room as if she were inspecting it. "Wow, Robin, you've really done well for yourself," she said, wearing this strange smile that didn't feel like a smile at all. I stood there, stunned. Tom followed her in, looking uncomfortable, while my dad, Mark, shuffled in last, his hands stuffed in his pockets, clearly unsure of what to do with himself. "What are you guys doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My heart was pounding, and I could feel tension rising inside me. I had a bad feeling about this conversation, but I was hoping maybe I was wrong. Mum turned around, still wearing that fake smile. "We're here to talk about living arrangements," she said. I blinked, confused. What Dad cleared his throat and finally spoke for the first time. "We think it's time for the family to be back together." I almost laughed. It was so absurd, so ridiculous, that for a second I thought they had to be joking. "You're joking, right?" I asked, my voice full of disbelief. Mum's smile faded quickly as she folded her arms, giving me a look that said I was the unreasonable one. "No, Robin, we've discussed it, and we believe it's time for the family to live together again," she said firmly. I just stared at her, speechless. This had to be a joke. After everything they'd done kicking me out on my birthday, and now they wanted to move in with me. Tom, who had been quiet up to this point, suddenly spoke in his usual smug tone. "Come on, Robin, don't be so dramatic. That's all in the past." I could feel my anger rising. "All in the past. You threw me out on my birthday, left me with no place to go, no help, nothing. And now you just want to stroll back into my life, as if none of that happened." Mum's expression grew colder. "We gave you the push you needed," she said in an icy tone. "Look how well you've done because of it. You should be thanking us." I was stunned. They were actually trying to take credit for my hard work, for the success I'd fought for on my own. "So, what? You think you can just show up here, claim my achievements, and then move in? This is my home, not yours." Dad, trying to play the role of peacemaker, stepped forward. "Robin, be reasonable. We're struggling right now. You have so much space here, and we thought it would be nice to be together again." My frustration mounted with every word they said. "You're only here because you need something. You didn't care about me when I was struggling, and now you expect me to help you. That's not how this works." Mum's face twisted with anger. "We're your family, Robin. We sacrificed for you. Everything you have is because of us. I couldn't hold back anymore." "Sacrificed? What did you sacrifice, Mum?" "You kicked me out. You didn't lift a finger to help me when I needed it most. You threw me away like I was nothing, and now you think you're entitled to my success, to my home." She opened her mouth to argue, but I wasn't finished. I built this life myself without any help from you. You don't get to walk in here and claim a piece of it. Tom rolled his eyes. God, Robin, stop being so selfish. We're just asking for a little help. The word selfish made me snap. Selfish? You want to talk about selfish, Tom? How about when you all threw me out and left me with nothing? Or showing up here now, demanding I give you a place to stay because you've messed up your own lives? That's what's selfish, not me. Dad stepped forward again, his voice softer, almost pleading. Robin, please. We're just asking for a chance. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions swirling inside me. No, you don't get to do this. You don't get to use me anymore. Mum's eyes narrowed into a glare. Fine. If you want to be difficult, we'll take legal action. We have rights. You know, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Legal action. On what grounds? We'll find something. She spat back, her voice dripping with venom. Don't push me, Robin. I let out a bitter laugh. Go ahead. Try. But let me tell you something. This is my house, and you have no claim to it. You're not moving in, not now, not ever. They didn't say anything for a moment, and I could see the anger building in their faces, but I didn't care. I wasn't backing down. Finally, I walked over to the front door and opened it wide. Get out, I said, my voice steady. They hesitated for a moment, but I stood my ground, waiting for them to leave. Mom huffed, giving me a look full of hatred before storming out. Dad followed her, looking like he wanted to say something but deciding against it. Tom just shook his head in disbelief and walked out without a word. As soon as they were gone, I closed the door and leaned against it, taking a deep breath. My heart was still racing and my hands were trembling, but I felt a strange sense of relief, like a weight had finally been lifted off my shoulders. I wasn't going to let them take advantage of me anymore. Not now. Not ever. After kicking my family out, things got quiet again. I won't lie, it was a relief. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over my own life, like I wasn't constantly waiting for the next disaster. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. My mum had thrown out that threat about legal action, and even though I didn't think she had any real grounds, I couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't done trying to worm their way back into my life. A few days later, I got a call from Mike. He's one of my closest friends, and thankfully, he's also a lawyer. I had mentioned the situation to him in passing, but I hadn't gone into all the details. Now that my family had crossed the line, I figured it was time to get some real advice. Hey, Robin, Mike said when I answered. You free to talk? I've been thinking about your situation. Yeah, sure, I replied, feeling a knot of anxiety form in my stomach. What's up? I've been looking into your parents' situation a bit more, he said, his tone turning more serious. I know you mentioned they've been having money troubles, and you're worried they might try something shady. Well, I did some digging, and it turns out things are worse than you thought. My heart sank. I didn't want to hear this, but I knew I had to. What do you mean? I asked. There's a history of financial problems, Robin. Tax issues, debt. It's not just that your dad lost his job and your mum's been overspending. They've been digging themselves into a hole for years. And now that you've made it clear they can't rely on you, they're getting desperate. I sat there, processing what Mike was saying. My mind flashed back to my mum's smug threats, her talk of legal action, and her sense of entitlement to what I'd worked for. It all made sense now. This wasn't just about needing help. They were trying to claw their way out of their mess, and they saw me as their escape route. So, what do? I asked, feeling the familiar weight of stress settle on my shoulders. Mike was quiet for a moment before answering. First off, you need to protect yourself. They might not have much of a case, but people do dumb things when they're desperate. We should file for a restraining order to make sure they can't harass you anymore. You've got enough evidence, their threats, them showing up at your house. It's time to take legal action yourself. A restraining order? That sounded extreme, but I knew it was the right move. My family had already shown they didn't respect my boundaries, and if they were desperate enough to keep pushing, I needed to protect myself. I'll do it, I said with a sense of determination, agreeing to file the restraining order. Mike walked me through the steps, and within a few days, everything was set in motion. This wasn't just about keeping them from showing up at my house, it was about finally setting boundaries. I had worked too hard to get where I was, and I wasn't going to let their problems mess with my progress. As all of this was unfolding, something odd started happening. I began receiving strange messages from mutual acquaintances, people who knew my family but hadn't contacted me in a while. At first, the messages were vague, But it quickly became clear what was going on. My parents were spreading lies about me. Apparently, I had abandoned them when they needed me the most. They painted me as selfish and ungrateful, accusing me of not helping after all they'd supposedly done for me. It was absurd. The same people who threw me out on my birthday were now playing the victim. I couldn't believe it, and yet it made me furious. I had worked so hard to rebuild my life, and now they were trying to ruin it by turning people against me. I called Mike, explaining the rumors and venting my frustration. What should I do? I asked, clearly upset. Honestly, don't respond, he advised. These people don't know the whole story, and your parents are counting on you to get defensive and try to explain yourself. Don't give them that satisfaction. If it goes to court, we'll handle it, and trust me, you have nothing to worry about. It wasn't easy to take Mike's advice. My first instinct was to tell everyone the truth, to defend myself and explain how my family had treated me, why I had every right to cut them off. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized he was right. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. I knew the truth, and that was enough. Weeks went by as the legal process moved forward. Mike was relentless in the courtroom, and when the restraining order was finalized, I felt a massive weight lift off my shoulders. My family couldn't come near me, and if they tried anything else, they'd be in serious legal trouble. But their problems didn't end there. Remember those financial issues Mike had uncovered? Well, they were even worse than we thought. After digging deeper, Mike discovered that my parents had been avoiding taxes for years. They had been hiding money, falsifying documents, and now the IRS was after them. It was almost poetic, watching them deal with the mess they had created. As much as I wanted to feel sorry for them, I couldn't. They had made their choices, and now they had to face the consequences. I wasn't going to be their savior anymore. One day, after everything had calmed down, I sat in my living room, looking out the window, reflecting on all that had happened. It felt strange to finally have closure. For so long, I had felt trapped by my family's expectations, their manipulations, and guilt trips. Now, for the first time, I felt free. Later that evening, Mike called to check in. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "I'm good," I replied, and for the first time, I truly meant it. It's been a crazy ride, but I'm good. "You did the right thing," Rob and Mike reassured me. "They made their decisions, and you made yours. Don't let them make you feel guilty for standing up for yourself." I smiled to myself. He was right. I had defended myself, and I wasn't going to feel bad about it anymore. For too long, I had let my family control how I felt and how I lived. Now, I was finally in charge of my own life, and that felt amazing.